Welcome you as well as our distinguished speaker for the evening. I will introduce our distinguished speaker in a minute. Before I do so, let me take care of a couple of housekeeping issues. My name is Mehran Kamrava. I'm the director of the Center for International and Regional Studies here at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service in Qatar. Our speaker tonight will be speaking on the topic of women in Qatar, quotas, qualifications, and Qatarization. Let me introduce to you our distinguished speaker, who is uniquely positioned, in my opinion, to speak on the topic. Dr. Sheikha Aisha bint Faleh Al-Thani is the chairperson and founder of the Faleh Group, which is a landmark in Qatar providing educational products and services of the highest quality. 3 schools, including the Doha Academy, fall under the group's umbrella. After graduating from Qatar University with a bachelor's degree in education and a bachelor's in English literature, some of my students are here, and I'm sure wonderful role model. So 2 bachelor's degrees. Sheikha Aisha went on to get a master's in business administration from the University of Hull in the United Kingdom, followed by a PhD degree in corporate governance from the Cass School of Business at the City University of London. Sheikha Aisha also serves on the board of directors of the Supreme Education Council, Reach Out to Asia, and the Zaytuna Institute and College. Please join me in welcoming Sheikha Aisha.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First, I would like to thank Georgetown University for hosting this event. It is a pleasure and an honor to speak to an audience of this academic caliber. Educational institutions like Georgetown are sorely needed not only in Qatar, but in the region in general. And gathering like this provide a platform for interacting and networking, a much needed platform. The topic today is close to my heart, not only because I'm a woman, not only because it is about women participation, but because I was following Qatarization and gender quota policies in the region and in the world. And I think striking a balance is no small feat. It's a daunting challenge to most countries in the world, not just Arab and Muslim countries. With the clear commitment of His Highness the Emir Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani towards education in Qatar's Vision 2030, women in Qatar are shattering old paradigms where women are in the house, they're taking care of kids. They are emerging as social and economic agents. Qatar has become a regional leader in education, from the Supreme Education Council, K-12 reform, to the higher education institutions like Georgetown University. Qatari women indeed are emerging as professionals who are contributing to the country's sustainable growth in a knowledge-based economy. Her Excellency Sheikha Al-Mahmoud, the Minister of Education, was appointed in 2003, and in that same year also, the first district attorney in Qatar and in the region was appointed. Her name was Maryam Abdullah Al-Jaber, and that marked another milestone for Qatar. More educated women have joined the labor market, and in 2010, the percentage of female employment to population ratio reached its highest in Qatar. Let me share some of the percentages with you. In Qatar, we had 50.5%. Kuwait following by 42.3%, UAE at 37.5%, Bahrain 31.4%, Oman at 23.6%, and Saudi Arabia at 14.6%. So Qatari women had the highest percentage. However, despite great strides in education and employment, a large gender gap remains in position of status in Qatar for women. United Nations data closest to year 2010 indicate that women's share of key roles, such as senior officials and managers, reached 22% in Bahrain, 14% in Kuwait, 10% in UAE, 8% in Saudi Arabia, and only 7% in Qatar. Most of these percentages compare unfavorably with other nations like Indonesia, and even more so in US when we compare them to US and Europe. So women are still underrepresented in decision-making positions in many fields. The question here is, what policies need to be revised to allow full integration of women into the economy and empower them to play a more active role in top leadership positions? What are the measures Qatar should adopt to promote the advancement of women? Qatar, understanding that education is one of the most powerful tools to remedy this situation, has introduced reform in education. Education indeed has been placed on the front burner. However, reforming education is only part of the formula for success. Unless we tackle Qatarization policies and gender quota policies, agreed on by all stakeholders, I have to add, then we won't reach success. Because of the lack of participation of women in the region, and because this lack of participation is holding back the region from further economic growth, some governments have stiffened their resolve to ensure unrealistic quotas are met and nationalization targets. However, not surprisingly, many public and private sector managers are reluctant to hire and retain nationals, especially women, who they feel lack the skills needed for the job. First, let me share with you my thoughts on Qatarization. I won't be critical, I promise. I'm always accused of being very critical. The policy, the Qatarization policy, is yet to be fully developed. For example, the policy did not indicate in some sectors which positions exactly should be Qatarized. It did not also consider that Qatarization could be more difficult in some sectors than others. And finally, it didn't consider that transferring knowledge and technologies would take more than the time expected in the plan. The policy also lacks proper monitoring, control, and evaluation systems. There is a lack of data regarding unmonitored population movement, tribalism, and other cultural factors. Due to lack of monitoring, there is no real evidence of the quality of training and care that Qataris are receiving in the public and private sector. What is ironic also is that the research conducted to craft those policies is done by foreign agencies and institutes. While there's no harm in recruiting RAND to do research, you cannot ignore the cultural input. Let me share with you one story here. I did some research on the K-12 system and the education reform in Qatar, and the results I got was totally different to the results RAND had in their research. So I went back for verification purposes to my interviewees, and I went back to the focus group, and we were talking, and I remember one Qatari man said, "You didn't expect us to tell this to RAND, did you? They are outsiders. Why should we speak to them about our concerns?" One of the, an agency, I'm not going to mention the name of the agency here, but they came to me and they said, "Look, we have this school in Ain Khalid, and we have few students in the school, and the place, the Ain Khalid is overpopulated even. They don't go to this secondary school for boys. We don't know why." And I had already interviewed a couple of parents from that school. And one parent said to me, and I will only use, I won't use the right family name here. Let's say he was Al-Hajri. He said, "I am Al-Hajri. Do you expect me to send my son to Al-Marri school?" He was beaten up the first day of school. And you know, here in Ain Khalid, we're all Al-Maris. So I travel across town, 45 minutes to take my son to another school so he's not beaten up every day. Tribalism is an issue that, you know, unless you have the Qatari input when you're doing research, you won't strike a balance. But enough said about criticizing the system. We are here to offer recommendations. I have only 30 minutes for this presentation. First, introducing a quota system for women will not be easy. And there's a risk of moving too fast. Even those companies that are most aggressively tackling Qatarization cannot simply replace 5% of skilled and experienced expat workers with national women. However, in the longer run, this change is inevitable and can be introduced gradually. Qatar needs to define its strategic vision for how women will fit into their workforce. Women have the education and, more importantly, the desire to play a more central role in Qatar's labor market. The entrance of more women into the economy will serve as an economic multiplier, creating more benefits for Qatar. However, developing a comprehensive strategy and carefully managing the transition is critical for the country. Through the use of gender quota, women are in some cases positively recruited to senior management positions in companies across Europe. Norway has introduced a legal quota requiring that at least 40% of board members of public companies be women. And it is a very successful model, I have to add. Spain and France have imposed a similar compulsory goal of 40% for female director companies to be reached by 2015 in Spain and 2017 in France. Companies will be dissolved if these quotas are not met. In Germany, companies are officially requested to increase the number of women on their boards, and a national debate is taking place on the viability of quotas. As a result, 30 major German corporations are now seeking to increase the number of women in senior positions. In Asia, the government of Indonesia has been encouraging women to move ahead in their careers. In 2004, the government set a policy that 30% of those holding decision-making positions in the civil service should be women. And after considerable success in 2011, the policy was extended to the corporate sector, and companies have been given 5 years to meet the requirement. Quota system can indeed be used in Qatar to empower women and involve them in the decision-making process, but only when the policies are realistic and agreed on by all stakeholders, including the private sector. The quota system will be a good measure to change the public mindset and encourage women to take up jobs in government and private organization. Private and semi-private companies in Qatar are under enormous pressure already to nationalize their workforce. My husband complains about it all the time. As a chairman of Doha Insurance, he said, we have a couple of women, where can we find more? Qatar has set targets of 50% national workforces for all sectors, even though nationals currently represent only 5.7% of the workforce, of the labor force. Hence, in my opinion, Qatarization required percentage is unrealistic and very, very ambitious. A gender quota policy is even worse. It needs to be more realistic. There is a clear opportunity to implement a gender quota system that would allow more women to join the workforce. Nonetheless, just 2.9% of Qatari women currently work in the private sector. Moreover, for Qatarization policies to be effective, there needs to be a check and balance system that scrutinizes Qatarization. I speak a lot about check and balance system because my background is corporate governance, so everything has to be with numbers with me. Some companies are under pressure to fulfill the required quota in a certain time, which leads to misallocation of Qataris in different sectors. So actually, it's hurting the economy, not benefiting it. Without a doubt, private sector employees may need to rethink the way they structure jobs, offering part-time work, job sharing, or flexible working hours. Research and evidence indicate that the appointment of women, as you might know, as top managers can positively improve the performance of a company as they bring different management styles, skills, and experience to the corporate environment. For me, among the companies that have addressed Qatarization strategically is QP. It has adopted a process for attracting qualified talent from all available sources. This includes hiring entry-level candidates directly from the ranks of recent graduates of women's colleges and vocational institutes. QP identifies promising students at the high school or undergraduate level and sponsors their subsequent studies abroad in exchange for a commitment that they will return to work at QP once they graduate. We need to highlight such models and highlight them as champions for other corporations to follow. Having said that, Qatarization policy should also see the important link between education institutions and labor market demand, as well as training within different corporations. Ignoring this link will result in inability of those institutions in providing the market with the required technical skills. In general, most women are employed within the public sector for several reasons. First, many of them do not have the necessary skills to work in the private sector. Secondly, even if they have those, they are not offered the training required to acquire those necessary skills. And even if they acquire the necessary skills needed for the private sector lacked incentives compared with public sector. And finally, some Qatari women might feel overwhelmed by the competitive environment that dominates the private sector, and so do not feel comfortable in such an environment. We have come to accept that education is politically correct. The government is responsible for education, while corporations are responsible for training. If the basic education was not provided, then this will increase the burden on corporations to spend more on training. At the same time, if employees were provided with excellent education but did not find the proper training they require, it will be a lost effort. While subsidizing training could solve the problem in the private sector, I, as a business owner, say we don't have the time to train women from scratch. What we need is to create a well-defined mechanism for the government support to the private sector, which will be available through service providers that understand the sector as well as the needs of women. To make things worse, we have to admit that the government employs more than what it actually needs as a measure of income distribution and creating jobs. This means that those workers are underutilized and have fewer and less working load than their counterpart in the private sector. These set of state employees would be unneeded in the private sector model and would have been gotten rid of. We are waking up to this, but not as fast as we should. This policy is making the approach toward development unstable. The key to winning over the private sector, in my opinion, may be for policymakers to offer, as I said, wage subsidies so that the private sector is more attractive to nationals. At the same time, they could offer financial incentives for training nationals, ultimately increasing productivity and creating more value-added jobs. The second recommendation is, I hope I won't get into trouble for this because I'm on the Supreme Education Council. But honestly, we need to implement an educational policy for women that takes into consideration the local market demand. Not only should we provide women with basic educational skills, but also develop curricula that include practical skills to help women become innovative, creative, and critical thinkers. Furthermore, special policies should be crafted promoting success in the workforce, such as entrepreneurship and professional development programs. There is a strong positive correlation between employability and the quality of education a woman receives. Most young Qatari women graduate in the fields of education and human and natural sciences, thus creating a gender imbalance in the labor market and key positions. Work labeled as female, such as teaching and social services in the public sector, offer better working hours and conditions. The education system and training in Qatar should be revamped to create a national workforce that could compete in global markets. In Qatar, inappropriate educational background and lack of training are major obstacles contributing to the limited improvement and development of women's performance. Moreover, for many of the educational initiatives, implementation has been very recent, so there has been little time to assess effects. For reforms to be effective, evaluation of policies must become an essential component of the process of monitoring so that initiatives can be revised and improved based on measured outcomes. Minimizing risks and identifying barriers to successful implementation should also be part of the system. Furthermore, there is no need to reinvent the wheel. We should look at the extensive range of reforms across the region and build a knowledge base of strategies that can be transferred from one country to another. In regard to higher education, and I exclude Georgetown from this, we need to strengthen links to the labor market through job placement programs. There is a need to expand the number of technical and vocational colleges and to forge public-private partnerships to increase training opportunities for women, especially in skills required for the private sector. Although changes in the training domain are underway, efforts to address the needs in this area are not very systematic or sustained, as is the case in the education domain, because some universities put their focus on academics in place of research and technical skills. Again, Georgetown is an exception to the rule. Third, current governmental policies and strategies are adopted, as I mentioned before, based on the advice and plans of foreign companies and institutes who know little about the culture and who sometimes view the contract as a business project rather than a nation's and government's endeavor to build their countries. Fourth, entrepreneurship, and I truly believe that entrepreneurship is the key for women advancement in the region and in Qatar in particular. A recent report showed that women in Qatar have a significant amount of wealth. The Boston Consulting Group estimates place wealth held by women in the MENA region at $500 billion. These women of high worth should consider putting some of this wealth to use in entrepreneurial ventures. Women in Qatar are less likely than men, research again shows, to be business owners or have plans to start a business. And I think raising awareness is the key to solve this. On the other hand, research again shows that some women's inadequate access to money in Qatar could also hinder entrepreneurship. Future research should examine the number of loans requested by qualified female entrepreneurs, and policymakers should assess the difficulty that aspiring female entrepreneurs face when seeking access to money. Let me not forget to mention here that Qatari women play a major role in community development. NGO for the welfare of children, the elderly, the poor, the special needs have been organized solely by women. Her Highness Sheikha Moza, chairperson of Silatek, and Her Excellency Sheikha Al chairperson of Reach Out to Asia, are great role models in this regard. To sum up, Qatar can play a major role in helping and encouraging women's integration in the economy. Private institutions and funds can support women's economic development through loans and grants. Cross-sector partnership should be encouraged as a key strategy in the promotion of women's role in the workforce. Women's programs should be developed to promote entrepreneurship, professional advancement, and relevant skills. The recent trend of more women entering the labor force is likely to continue due to the increased investment in educating women for jobs and the change in social attitudes. Businesses will face pressure to adapt to this trend, but will not necessarily use the same model seen in the West. In light of the success of quotas in Norway and Indonesia, I believe that the use of a quota system, a gender quota system in Qatar would work, provided only women with the right qualifications and experience are selected for senior positions. But although quotas will put pressure for change on public institutions and business companies, they cannot offer the sole solution. Educational strategy needs to be revised to allow for the full integration of women in all walks of life. Nonetheless, change and modernization can only come gradually from within our society. Let us not forget the great tradition we come from and strike a balance of excellence in education whilst keeping a sense of who we are as Muslims. Yes, we need reforms, but these reforms should respect our social values and traditions. Let me emphasize here that women's rights are not new to our traditions. These rights are basically established by Islam. During the Caliphate time, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he appointed the first souk superintendent, which is equivalent to today's Minister of Finance. There were no quota systems then. She was not chosen as a token, a woman token, but rather she filled a much-needed position. Finally, I would like to stress that empowering women and providing them with equal opportunities will allow them to emerge as social and economic change agents. Women represent half of society, and they raise and nurture the other half. Hence, the success of our society depends on how it invests in its women. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. We're all actually, if you wouldn't mind, Sheikha Aisha has kindly agreed to answer some questions. I actually just sat there entranced and learned. So thank you so very much.
Thanks for having me.
It's been an honor. Yes, sir. Sir, if you could speak louder so everybody can hear you, that'd be great.
The gender quota system, the educational reform that is needed. And at the beginning of your speech, you talked about the local insight into any research. Drawing on the local insight, there has been recently in Al Arab newspaper an article titled Best Men's One, Enough Women. Written by freedom of speech and all of that, but at the same time, in other countries, this could be considered gender bias. Now, I would like to comment on it, because the thing that I took from that article basically is that if you're a woman in Qatar and you took a leading position in your career, you're somehow taking a step forward in the society, and that puts you at the forefront of criticism, which can lead to issues. The article wasn't very neutral, my personal opinion.
Okay, I'll answer this by first relating a story I heard. You know, as a member of the Supreme Education Council, I go to attend board meetings. It used to be with Her Highness, now it's with Sheikha Hind, and sometimes with the Crown Prince as well. So on my way, I was early as usual. I'm always accused of being early for. I sat there and nobody knew me. There were a few people from the education institutes, and a man was telling his friend, he said, you know, isn't it about time you got promoted? And the man turned to his friend, he said, you need to be a woman to be promoted in this sector. So men, yes, they are discouraged by and overwhelmed. I mean, look at Sheikha, Her Highness, Sheikha Moza. She is overwhelming, intimidating to any man. She's done so much, mashallah, nobody can keep up, man or woman, with her. I was again doing a segment with with Tim Sebastian from Heart Talk. And before we went to do the segment, he sat with me and he said, Sheikh Aisha, I would like to discuss with you the fact that, you know, in the region, women are segregated against, and they are the issue of abuse. I said, yes, there is abuse. And he said, really? In what way? I said, men are beaten up by their husbands. This is the only thing I hear from people. You can't empower women more in Qatar, and I think it's because of Her Highness setting a model, shattering old paradigms, mashallah. So I can, you know, when I read this article, Best Men's One, it seemed a man wrote it, definitely. And maybe there were a few women that, without mentioning names, that, and maybe there were few, but I really have to applaud His Highness, because when Sheikh Al was appointed as the first education minister in the region, when she left, any government would just use another woman as a token minister. He could have picked anybody as a token minister, a woman. There weren't qualified women to fill minister positions. So no woman became a minister after Sheikh Al and we have to really applaud that. So women definitely in Qatar are not chosen to fill, to satisfy cosmetically that purpose. I don't know if that answers your question.
Madam? Yes. Yes.
Good evening. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very nice. I was wondering if you would mind sharing your insight on two different kinds of issues, because of course empowering women in Qatar is really good, but of course you've got repercussions on different other issues. The first one would be on social grounds. For example, when I see my Qatari friends who actually are engineers or trying to access high-level positions, at some point they fear they're too late to get married and then have kids. So how does Qatar address this issue as well? Because it's really good to have women, of course, going to university and have a nice job and everything, but in this country, obviously it's better to get married young and have children, quite a lot of children. So that would be my first question. The second one.
I'm sorry, let's just stop there. There are more questions, and so thank you. Thank you.
Tell that to my daughter. She said, I won't get married until I finish my university. And let me tell you something. There is, again, paradigm shifts here. Men nowadays seek educated women who can share, who can even share the money. He can, first of all, he can converse with, because men are very educated now, similarly women. And secondly, because the income would be better if a man, marries a woman who's well established, who's a graduate, and I think age is not yet that much of a problem, at least, to address at this point. That's my opinion, but I'm not...
Thank you. Gentlemen, yes.
Thank you for your presentation. You said that we cannot ignore the cultural aspect, yeah? Okay, how that we can involve the culture with this process without harming it? Because we know that the culture in Qatar, especially in the Gulf region, is very important for us. So how we can deal with the cultural aspect with this quota system or Qatarization system?
Okay, I mentioned that the quota, a gender quota system, should be tackled looking at sector by sector. And you cannot, generalize and say this quota system should apply to all sectors. As you mentioned, there are cultural factors. As much as we like to sometimes deny, there are tribalism issues in this regard. So sector by sector should be a strategy should be crafted for each sector, and a different quota for each sector as well. Yes, there are engineers now, women engineers, but not enough to fulfill a quota system. Again, tradition and is very close to my heart, and I feel we should not lose that while we're discussing quota system and nationalization.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. Yes, madam. Go ahead. Yes.
Thanks a lot for your presentation. Just a general question. You mentioned a lot of you rightly mentioned a lot of challenges that we face in the Qatarization process and the policies and the practices that are on the ground. In those challenges, like, for example, looking at Qatarization as a way of developing capacity as opposed to just a number or a quota. In your research, did you find anything specific to challenges faced by women as opposed to men? This is the first segment of my question, and the second part is, within your research, if you had found any specific challenges for women with this regard, do you feel that they're caused more because of policies or because of cultural attitude and mindsets?
First of all, the sky is the limit for women in Qatar. You might read the latest research that mentioned that the best place to be a woman seeking education is in the region is Qatar. The worst place, I think, was Saudi Arabia. However, the worst employability-wise was Qatar as well. So there you go. In regard to the second question, I forgot, what was it about? And yes, there are, yes. I mean, one of my friends, she's a woman, but then she loves to deal with real estate. She sells and buys and all the time. She says, I just wish they have proper mechanisms for us women to go and seek approvals and seek, there should be policies in each and every ministry to facilitate. If we're looking to have women be efficient in all walks of life, then might as well offer them the access, to have access to such things. So yes, there are lack of policies in this regard, I have to admit.
We have time for only 2 more questions, and we have a lot more. We want you to come back.
He's been raising his hand forever.
Which one? Okay, this one.
I really think that Qataris in general, not only women, are being used as tokens. We're seeing huge acceleration in the careers of Qatari CEOs at the age of 30 and 32, and retirees by the age of 40 and 41. So what do you think of that impact on the young generation that's seeing people retiring at 41 and 42? I don't see a proper career path from me as a fresh graduate. That shift in the career path, I want to get the main objectives, or look at the main skills that I want to do. And if you look at the other way around, after the huge increase in the wages so far, the private sector doesn't even look this to me. So I don't know if you can reflect on that.
I agree with you totally, and it's less attractive, the private sector, and unless strategy is revised and it's subsidized wages-wise, training-wise by the government, it will never take off in regard to the private sector. In regard to, did you mean that women careers taken off quickly? Both of them. Yes. I mean, my son, he works in Qatar Investment Authority. He will kill me for mentioning him now. And he said, my friend, he just graduated and he's my manager now. And yes, it is again because of the pool is very small of fresh graduates or experienced professionals. So we do see that, but it is we are a developing nation, and you expect to see that. There's nothing wrong with that. As in regard to the retirement age, yes, I do agree with you totally. The lifespan of the work is very short, and I believe there is a revision for that law, inshallah, coming up soon.
Would you mind picking the last person? The tough job of picking the last person to ask a question. I pass it off.
Okay. The picking?
Yes, if you don't mind.
He's been, I think,
yes. Okay,
very
the gentleman.
attentive.
Yes.
Thank you. I started my working career back in 1984, and throughout the years until late 90s, I have hardly come across any woman leader to go and say Qatar. Don't we think there was a political desire, political will to push women into, leading positions? And the Sheikh Al-Mahmoud may not necessarily was the best fit for the job.
This is an insult.
I know
You picked him.
yeah, I mean, this could be a fact, that we have experienced and lived in this country, especially with the first lady and the public. There was a need to get more ladies involved into the public as well. I don't want to mention about any failures of women being leaders. Just we need to push that.
I think when you're looking at women leaders, Qatar is the best place, wallah. Qatar is the best place to look for women leaders. First, we have Her Highness, mashallah, yani Her Highness. Secondly, we have Sheikha Al who's everywhere. I think she single-handedly changed the art scene in Qatar and became the art person of the year this year, I believe. I mean, okay, I don't have the political backing, and I've been, alhamdulillah, I found out for the third year now I've been chosen as the 500 most influential Muslims in the world. So it's from Georgetown University, a book by Georgetown University. I don't have that political backing, so I think it's the sky is the limit for women in Qatar. And we do have great leaders. We have Sheikha Hanadi, my sister-in-law, who's also chairperson. Oh, she would. I can't comment. I did mention she's my sister-in-law, so I won't comment. But my husband is not involved, huh?
Yes.
It was solely her. MashaAllah. Enough said, I think.
It has been. It's been terrific. This actually is a demonstration of the wonderful dialogue. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What a terrific speaker. You gave us lots of food for thought, and I think now there's time for us to eat. Please join us for a small reception, and thank you again for being here tonight. Thank you, and good night.